Hi, friends. As you can see, we are diving into the new release from Sonia, the mini Keyaki Niji and Buffer brushes. What an exciting release. When I saw that we were getting like a Niji Pro in a mini, oh my goodness. And the Buffer too. Excitement all around. My apologies for not getting this video up before the release. The brushes did arrive, which, by the way, let me start by being a little more grateful and thanking the Beautylish team and Sonia for sending these brushes. Because of the timing of when the brushes arrived and my availability to film didn't quite mesh as well as I would have liked, so that's why this video is going up now. Hopefully these items will still be available if you are thinking about purchasing them. Let's go back into history and just briefly cover the Keyaki timeline. We had the first Keyaki set that released in December of 2020, featuring the mini base, which was the precursor to my beloved, well, our beloved Fusion face set. And in July of 2022, we had the Keyaki version 2 set that featured the jumbo base in the shorter handle and the worker, which was a new addition to what will be the Fusion Eye set that was coming out a few months later. And now we have the Keyaki Niji and the Keyaki Buffer. The Keyaki Buffer brush will retail for $75 and the Keyaki Niji for $85. Limited edition, both with Psycho bristles, the same Keyaki wood. These will be categorized as blenders, buffers, and all-around finishers. The Keyaki Buffer is modeled after the original Face 1 that premiered in the Fundamental set. I forgot what Sonia said about the comparison between the Buffer Pro. I think Buffer Pro might have had a little longer of a bristle, and then there was one more, compared to the Smooth Buffer, which is not only a smaller brush head size overall. I think just that actually. If you see them both together, you can see the Keyaki Buffer is bigger, but now we have the shorter handle. And I would say that with the introduction of both the Keyaki Niji and the Keyaki Buffer, these are the largest brushes in the Keyaki series, maybe up against the jumbo base. But in terms of the powder brush category, bigger than the soft face and bigger than the soft cheek, I believe, classic face, right? So we have a jump from size and back to the Keyaki Buffer. And I think this is true for what Sonia said on her blog, which I would highly recommend that you visit, sweetmakeuptemptations.com. I'll make sure to add that link up above and down below. I think I can I add it up above? I'll figure that out while I'm editing. Sonia loves her Face 1. And when she had created this with the release of her Fundamental set, when she came onto the scene with her brush brand, she felt with all the Fude that she has collected, and Fude is Japanese for brush, where she has not encountered a brush quite like the Face 1. Something with as much density, it being a flat top, but with the airiness and fluidity on the skin. Tough to achieve because densely packed brushes typically don't feel fluid on the skin. They don't have that movement quality. So when Sonia sought out to create something like the Face 1, I feel like this kind of revolutionized finishing brushes for many people, to have something with a flat top like this, but for it to glide over the skin without disrupting the original application of products. In fact, everything looked smoother than it would appeared initially in terms of refining texture and introducing, I think, the step of buffing to many people's makeup routine when they weren't quite familiar with it. I was not familiar with buffing, and when I discovered the importance of it and the difference it made, my goodness, when reaching for the Face 1 and immediately seeing the difference of taking your time and buffing your makeup to ensure that it's smooth, that you have a lovely gradient from blush to bronzer or contour, was definitely life-changing. And I also remember when Wayne Goss was speaking about this step on one of his videos, and he used one of his brushes, but I think the Face 1 definitely like a notch above the rest in terms of delivering that flawless buffing application that was hard to achieve with other brushes. Despite how many Fude brushes I now have in my collection, the Face 1 And now the Keyaki Buffer truly stands alone still as unique brush designs. Now that we have it in the shorter handle, much easier to travel with. You can see the brush floats out and just has beautiful movement here. Despite how many bristles it contains, again, it just feels air whipped on the skin. Sonia had described the sensory experience as it being like a cloud. It just floats on the skin. It doesn't move your makeup, because I think maybe people would have been apprehensive to the idea of buffing, thinking that their blush and bronzer would just end up all over the place. Not so. Because of just the glide and softness of the bristles, which is brown dyed Psycho goat hair, you achieve that smooth blend buff without disrupting your makeup, and you can still, it's just great. You can sense the density of the brush because it is flat top, so you can feel the entire surface area of the brush without, again, it moving your makeup. It just, the functionality of it is truly great for a buffing experience. But what I did for the demo, I wanted to pick up something that was tougher, like a gelé type of a texture. So I picked up my Sisley Bronzer, which I had featured in my bronzer collection video, because it's one of those consistencies where hard to pick up, something I actually would use the Niji Pro with, but I wanted to use the capability of the Keyaki Buffer with this flat top design to pick up a little more product. And man, how it deposited the Sisley Bronzer through the hollows of my cheeks was utterly perfect. I got enough color to have that bronze effect, and despite it being mostly a finishing brush, it could be great for bronzer, especially for those harder to pick up textures that maybe you don't want a robust serving like the Niji Pro would give, but you just want a little more than what a softer brush would pick up. And that's why I wanted to experiment with using the Keyaki Buffer with something like the Sisley Bronzer. And I also wanted to use it with something softer, like a baked powder formula here found in the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Bronzer in Radiant Bronze Light. I picked up just a little bit because since the Hourglass powder is softer, I would have more of an intense serving of color, and I wanted to keep that mostly on the upper hollows of the cheek area. But what's outstanding is, despite how much powder product I applied, the powder still appeared skin-like in finish. They didn't have like that overly shimmery textured look on the skin, and I attribute that to the Keyaki Buffer. Okay, I mean, listen, I applied 2 bronzers with sheen. That is the key. When you're applying powders with sheen, I think it is essential that you buff down the blend so that it looks more radiant and blurred versus shiny all over the cheeks. I also went in with Hourglass's Ambient Lighting Powder in Luminous Light. Since this is a finishing powder, I only thought it appropriate to pair it with the Keyaki Buffer, and without a doubt, what a match made in heaven. The way it just applied over my foundation without it moving, and it just feeling seamless on the skin, it's outstanding. And now with the Keyaki Buffer being with the shorter handle, I'm definitely more inclined to bring it along. I do recognize perhaps the limitations in that despite it being a shorter handle, the brush head size I still think moderately large. So just be careful when you do pack this, where you might have to place a brush guard over the head because you don't want this to get squished, which could happen if you are storing it in one of those brush cases that are not stand up, the cylinder kind. I haven't used those in quite a while, but that's just something to consider when choosing which kind of case you would like to put your Keyaki Buffer in when traveling. I also used it with, whoa, blast from the past, the Cover FX Monochromatic Blush Duo in Warm Honey. How obsessed was I with Warm Honey? I just wanted to see how it would apply with blush. Perhaps not my go-to, and Sonia did make this distinction on her blog where she outlined the functions preferably for the Keyaki Buffer, and I think blush was probably one for the Keyaki Niji, not necessarily the buffer, but I just thought, why not? If I was in a pinch and I didn't have, whether it would be the classic face or the soft face. I could get away with some major cheek product application with the smooth buffer, especially if I'm using it with something like Benefit Starla or even Terra. Start it here in the hollows and just bring it here on the center of the face, please. Sure, not ideal, but it could be done because it's still a phenomenal brush and it's not going to wreck the apples of your cheeks. In fact, it might even smooth out that area, which tendency is to look more porous and textured on me anyway. And now we have, oh boy, the Keyaki Niji. And let's go into the comparisons because I know you're dying to see how this compares to the original Niji Pro and the Jumbo Bronzer. How it compares to the Niji Pro is that actually the brush head size is the same. The brushes themselves is a mixture of white and dyed or white and black Psycho Goat, where the Keyaki Niji Pro is all brown dyed Psycho Goat hair. There is a little more density in the Niji Pro, whereas in the Keyaki Niji, you have more fluffiness and airiness. There's more movement in the skin, and I definitely can detect that. Even just placing the brush heads on my cheeks as such, you can feel there's a lot more density in the Niji Pro, which I feel definitely killer with a texture like the Sisley Bronzer. Hard to pick up. It's going to just get it on your skin fast and robustly. Whereas the Keyaki Niji, and I applied this with the same bronzer, it doesn't pick up as much. Most definitely not, because although it a fan brush, or I don't think Sonia categorized it as a fan brush, it's more like a flat brush, but despite it looking like a fan brush and its density is still very fluffy in nature, so it doesn't have that intense distribution of color, especially when you pair it with a gelée type texture. This truly shines with a powder product. So I used it with the same Hourglass powder and it picked up a lot, as you see. So I would use this for like my powder bronzer lineup, my Gucci bronzer, my, oh boy, all the bronzers are escaping me now, my Haus Labs bronzer, even Paradise Venus from Pat McGrath, although not a bronzer, but I would use Paradise Venus from hollows to cheeks without a doubt. You could also use it for contour. I would just place the contour lower on the edge here so you have more of a direct placement, and then use the brush head to buff out that application. And something you can use this for also is buffing. So both the Keyaki Buffer and the Keyaki Niji can be used for buffing purposes, but you'll get more of a buff from the buffer because of the flatter surface area. You can get a good buff from the Niji. Listen, really nice because it just has this whipped-like sensation over the skin and it's more airy. So if you want more of like that airy kind of like really huge circular motion of a, I'm just thinking like this dance-wise, you'll find that in the Keyaki Niji, and I think it's because the Keyaki Niji merges the Jumbo Bronzer and the Niji Pro, right? What I love about the Jumbo Bronzer is despite the big brush head size, there's directness, but also fluffiness at the same time. There's predictability in your placement. And I do feel that with the Keyaki Niji, but you still have a little more directness, I think, from the Keyaki Niji than you do from the Jumbo Bronzer. So this is best of both worlds. If you were like, listen, I like the Niji Pro, but I really like the Jumbo Bronzer, you didn't know which one to get, maybe the Keyaki Niji will be the one for you. I love all three, and an argument I would make for having all three, here we go, is that they are for different purposes, right? The Jumbo Bronzer it's just a little more, there's a little more freestyle in the Jumbo Bronzer. And what's unique about it, like I said in my original video, is that you just have really nice movement despite the brush's head size, right? And the bristle counts. It just, you know where the bronzer will stay and you know it will look blended like butter. With the Keyaki Niji, there's a little more directness for sure, but you don't lose that airiness and movement in the brush, which is outstanding, and something if you felt you needed from the Niji Pro, where specifically I would use this with like Tom Ford's Bronze Age or even Chantecaille Sirena, Makeup Forever's Pro Fusion bronzers. All those baked textures are Niji Pro appropriate. If I wanted an application that was more blown out, then I would use the Jumbo Bronzer. But if I wanted a little bit of both now, I have now the Keyaki Niji, and I actually use this to apply the Cover FX Monochromatic Blush Duo. I just applied it first center of the brush and then on the edge of the brush. It was fine. Listen, I know it might not be ideal because the brush head is rather large for the cheek area, but you can get it done 100%. Especially if you start higher on the hollows and just bring it here on the center. Again, it's just so fluffy and mobile here that the blush will stay where it needs to. It's not going to end up in odd areas whatsoever. And then I took it for a final buffing on both sides of my face. It's exceptional for buffing. It's such a pleasure to use also because it's so soft and fluid and has just this, it just moves beautifully on the skin. Again, without moving your makeup around, without disrupting your foundation blend, it dances so beautifully. And I truly think with both Keyaki versions 1 and 2, and now with the introduction of the Niji and Buffer, please, my travel brush needs are met beyond. And if you wanted to know about the Fuji brush definitely more fluffy, right? So this has a lot more fluffiness and movement to it. We're a little more direct with the Keyaki Niji. Just wanted to make that brief comparison, especially if you missed out on the Fuji brush. You can find a similar experience, not quite the same. Similar if you purchase the Keyaki Niji. And again, with the original Niji, the Keyaki version is just more fluffy. It's more fluffy. You can see there's a lot more movement here than the Niji Pro. I love both for different reasons. I'm happy I have both. And yes, I was sent both. So I understand if you need to be a little more strict with which you choose to buy because these are expensive, and to have both probably not necessary. I just wanted to outline the differences because they are, but I could understand where you're like, listen, this is how I like my makeup to be applied, or this is the finish I want, or this is like how I want my brushes to feel. Depending on those parameters will help you decide which brush will be great for you. There's just something about a shorter handle with this brush head design. I don't know what it is. It's just so compelling to me. Like, I can't stop looking at it. Visually, that's what's happening in my brain right now. Really happy with this release, and what an opportunity also if you were eyeing the original Face Pro, the Smooth Buffer, and the Buffer Pro. You weren't quite sure, and sure, you could have any of these brushes and it's going to be a similar experience, but if you were waiting for a short handle version, well, we have it. And if you have never used Sonia's Face 1, get ready for your life to be changed. I'm serious. When you use this for the first time, you will immediately understand just the thoughtfulness behind this design, the reason why she created the Face 1, because there is truly not a brush like it. Again, the flat topness of it all, how much bristles are in the ferrule, but it feel air-light, cloud-like, silky. It's unlike anything you will ever experience in your brush life. So dramatic. So those are the details, demos, and comparisons. I hope they were helpful to you, fam. And a huge thank you again to the Beautylish team and for Sonia for sending these gifts. I am grateful to have received these because it does help with the brush and makeup budget. But also, if you were waiting for this video, again, my apologies for it uploading when it is, that hopefully the brushes are still available and you're able to make a decision whether you want to purchase or not. Let me know what you decided to do down in the comments, fam. I will see you down there, and until then, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. And until then, I will see you on here again with another review, tutorial, brush extravaganza, or monthly faves. Take care, and I will see you again soon.